Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth. All powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
The Agile Brand.
Welcome to Season 6 of the Agile Brand, where we discuss marketing technology and customer experience trends, insights, and ideas with enterprise and technology platform leaders. We focus on the people, processes, data, and platforms that make brands successful, scalable, customer-focused, and sustainable. This is what makes an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advising Fortune 1000 brands on MarTech, marketing operations, and CX, best-selling author and speaker. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that my latest book, Priority is Action: 7 Principles for Better Strategies, Decisions, and Outcomes, is now available. In it, I give ideas and insights for leaders and teams that need to make meaningful progress on their priorities. After all, our priorities are what we do, not what we say we'd like to do. You can find Priority is Action on Amazon or learn more on my website, gregkihlstrom.com. Now let's get on to the show. Recently, the Biden administration announced plans to prohibit the use of salary history when hiring for federal employee roles, as relying on a candidate's previous salary history can disproportionately impact women and members of underserved communities. Currently, 21 states in the U.S. have laws or executive orders limiting employers from using applicants' salary history, and some states fully prohibit it. Department of Labor data found in places that have salary history bans, minority workers who changed jobs saw a 7.9% increase in their wages. While we mostly talk about marketing and the customer experience on this show, as we all likely know, employees and the employee experience directly affect customers. So today we're going to talk about salary transparency and key ways business leaders can successfully take a more modern approach to HR and navigate pay transparency within their organization. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Sydney Artt, Director of People at Anaconda. Sydney, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and get to speak with you.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this topic with you. Why don't we get started with you giving a little background on yourself as well as your role at Anaconda?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. So the vast majority of my background has been in tech, mostly seed stage to mid-sized startups, specifically running people organizations. So I've overseen everything from talent acquisition to diversity, equity, and inclusion and other employee programs through to employment law and compliance on a global scale. So I've seen a lot, but I'm honestly I really love the work that I do, and I'm genuinely excited to get to focus on all of this on a daily basis, as cheesy as that may sound.
No, that's great.
Yeah. Currently, I'm at Anaconda. We are recognized actually as the world's most popular platform for Python-powered data science and AI development. So we provide the operating system for AI that actually enables users to securely and really easily harness the power of open source software to get to transform their organizations. Here, I am lucky enough to be running the people team, and we support a global employee base. We have we have employees in about 10 countries around the world currently.
Great. Well, looking forward to talking about this with you. Let's get started. Got a few things to talk about related to pay transparency and how this benefits employees. So let's get started by talking about how to strike a balance between a strategy that aligns with company values and fostering a culture of trust. Can you talk about what should companies be looking at there?
This is a great question. I would say, in my opinion, company values and a culture of trust go completely hand in hand. You really have to develop values that directly affect how the company operates, how it's going to inspire and engage employees, and how it'll also obviously ensure company success. So, some things that companies should be looking at in terms of how they build that culture really falls into, are they going to clearly understand the company mission and vision, state of the business? How do they tie into the success of the company? And just ensuring that it's very clear that the company values their employees. I think those are the biggest ways of really establishing that sense of trust. And also, honestly, having, maybe transparency as a part of the core company values.
So what are some of those things that erode that trust? Particularly when it comes to how a company might treat their employees equitably, or and how can brands build back that trust if it is getting eroded?
Yeah, great question. There's plenty of ways, obviously, that a company can erode trust. I think when it specifically comes to equitable processes and just how employees are feeling, the two biggest things that are going to erode the trust are pay transparency and opportunities. So if there's a lack of that, they're not going to trust leadership, they're not going to trust the people team, and they will likely become disengaged. So, how that can be built back is really going to be creating a stronger and more transparent framework for these, and really making sure that employees are educated on this framework, how it came to be, what the philosophy was behind it, really bringing them along with you on that journey. So, with pay transparency, they really need to understand, where they fall into their range. What is the company's comp philosophy? Where are they getting this data? And then the other part of it, I would say, really is the strong L&D opportunities, having a very clear career map where every role and, upward progression is really based on measurable goals that they can attain, and focus is similar to that.
And so I would imagine, there's a lot of talk these days. There's a lot of companies that, DEI is front and center on their about
Yeah.
pages of their website, and they're doing a lot of talk about this. And I think when we're talking about erosion of trust and everything, I would imagine some of that at least is kind of the gap between talk and action, right? So when's the right time for a company to start talking about making improvements or the improvements that they've made here? Do companies run the risk of looking like they're all talk if they don't wait a little while and kind of let their actions speak for themselves? What are your thoughts there?
This is a big one. Honestly, I'm a big believer that if you plan to tell your employees literally anything, whether it is, employee engagement, survey results, or program changes, comp, anything that you are doing, you have to follow through. That will erode trust incredibly quickly. So my recommendation is act fast, obviously, because the longer you wait, the more that trust is eroded. But really, you have to have a plan in place with both short and long-term goals that you hope to achieve, and be able to communicate that plan and really act on that plan to ensure that you really have longer term success, and that trust does become a key part of the culture.
Yeah, yeah. And so acting on that as well, even with the best intentions, it may be difficult for some of those things to be done without the right internal processes, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that as well, and talk about implementing data tools that support internal processes to ensure all information is available so people can make realistic decisions on pay changes. So how does an organization go about doing this? What are some of the areas where an organization should be looking at and analyzing their data?
Yeah, so I would say look at your employee base first. Understand the levels, that if you don't have levels, understanding what titles are falling where in terms of the compensation. That'll also help you build, a leveling framework, if you will. But always look internal first and understand what potential pay gaps there are, because you really have to make sure that, you're going to account for that in terms of budget. Next, I would say looking externally. So, as an example, we use comp tools like OpenComp to get a better understanding of really accurate market data. But there are plenty of tools out there, and a ton of resources that you can definitely leverage to be able to understand where your current employees are falling in terms of the market.
Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth. All powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
What are some of the things standing in the way of, it seems straightforward. I mean, lots of things seem straightforward until they're enacted, of course, but like seems straightforward. But, what are some of the roadblocks that companies run into, whether it's technical, whether it's political, whatever that may be? What are some of those roadblocks to doing this effectively?
Yeah, it's straightforward until it's not, definitely.
Right, right.
Um, I would say the biggest one, honestly, I think is budget. That's always going to be a tricky one to navigate, especially if you're at an earlier stage startup, which may not have the funds to be able to pull in a bunch of comp tools.
Yeah.
So I think, tools can be very expensive. The other part of it is that they can often be incomplete with the data that's applicable to your industry or your size of company. So sometimes you do have to get creative, but I think really budget falls into the biggest one. If it's a political issue, an internal politics type thing, really you have to just make sure that the executives who are in charge of like getting that buy-in from them, making sure that they are aligned and that they really understand why this is so essential and how it's actually going to really benefit the company.
Yeah, yeah. And so, as you mentioned at the top of the show, Anaconda is a data science platform that seems like it can certainly help in these areas. Can you talk a little bit about how a tool like Anaconda can be utilized in applications like this?
In plenty of ways.
Nice.
Obviously. No, I would say the biggest or most obvious way is really that, the internal data companies possess and how Anaconda can really help them make sense of that data. When you're looking at employee comp compared to market data, it can get really messy. You can definitely get very in the weeds or in like a data hole, as I like to call it. So Anaconda really helps enable those teams to use the data to improve outcomes for their employees, potentially by even showing average pay bands or salaries for roles through the data visualization.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And so is this like not low code friendly? Like how does, what kind of people in what kind of roles within an organization are usually using a tool like Anaconda?
Any role within a company can really leverage Anaconda. It's open source, it's easy to use, which is great.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we do get pegged as like a data science platform, but it is something that an HR team could use, finance could definitely use. So anytime that you are trying to make sense of massive heaps of data, Anaconda can really clean that up and make it easier to digest.
That's great. Yeah. So last thing I wanted to talk about, we've talked a bit about, some of the why and how and things. Wanted to talk about determining how to share information internally, because this is, pay information, traditionally there's sensitivity around sharing salaries and all those things. So it's, this is, to some, it's perhaps a new territory, right? But the transparency, is definitely really interesting here. So, how do you, want to talk a little bit about how we share this internally with employees, and how it can best be implemented to entice future candidates. So what's your recommendation about how much information is enough versus too much information when it comes to sharing this kind of information with current and future employees?
Totally. And I would say this is a trickier one to navigate just because it is so dependent on the company culture.
Yeah.
You really can't have a one size fits all approach because every company has an incredibly unique culture. I'm based in Colorado, which was the first state to actually pass the pay transparency legislation. So I do remember when that came about, there was so much discussion about what makes sense. How do we navigate this? It is really complex because of also the sensitivity, right? Like this is personal information, or it was considered that way
Yeah.
previously.
Yeah.
So, my recommendation is to first evaluate your company culture and what makes sense for it, because again, it's going to be different. So, really understanding what is the level of transparency currently, what's the appetite for more transparency. You really do have to be mindful of the too much information. I'm huge on transparency. I probably teeter on too transparent sometimes, but it can really get noisy and distracting for employees, especially if they don't have an in-depth understanding of, how that comp data comes together, where it comes from, how we evaluate roles differently, so on and so forth. So I can understand how, especially for someone newer to this, it can be incredibly intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah.
My practice is definitely looking at company culture, what makes sense for that. Typically, this is just my personal approach. I really like to have you absolutely should have employees understanding what their comp range is and where they fall into it. I'd also really recommend having comp transparency for the career track that the employee is in. It really helps for them to understand their career progression, what opportunities could really look like. And it also really engages them and motivates them to keep moving up that ladder. When when you have the visibility into other career tracks, again, compensation is sensitive, so you have to handle it delicately, and you don't want to necessarily have it become an issue where an employee is disgruntled because software engineers make more, or whatever the case may be. So
Right.
just really making sure that you're having a really, really mindful approach to all of this.
And I would imagine, kind of going back to the data platform part of this is, because this is, sensitive, whether it's personal, PII, or, just sensitive information. There's also, to what you just said, there's a lot of nuance to it, right? So, I think it sounds like having the right platform that's able to, kind of make sense of that there are different types of roles. There's different kinds of things that go into different, even potentially different roles have different compensation. Sales might have a different compensation structure even than a software engineer, and things like that. So, it seems like this is where understanding nuance and being able to illustrate and slice and dice data based on nuance seems incredibly important, right?
I could not agree more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we should get you in sales at Anaconda.
I know, right? I take commissions, but it's
Great, great.
um,
I'll let them know.
nice. So one more thing here. You've said that the push for salary transparency will be the biggest workplace transformation since the mass adoption of working remotely. Can you talk a little bit more about this? And certainly, some of the things we've already talked about support this, but would love just a little more thought there.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this a lot more. I don't know if we have the time necessarily, but I would say the biggest thing that this is really going to help change is eliminating the pay gap. We are all aware that underrepresented groups make less,
Yeah.
and that's for various reasons. But I think companies being, unable to ask candidates for their compensation history will really allow for stronger pay equity across the board. It gives candidates a stronger chance making the money that they deserve based on their qualifications and their experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Sydney, thanks so much for joining the show today. One last question before we wrap up here. You've given a lot of great advice and insights already, but what's one piece of advice you'd have for organizations that they can do today to make a first or maybe a next step towards greater salary transparency?
Yeah, I would say evaluate your current employee data. That way you can understand what gaps there may be and you can fix those gaps, bridge them and make sure that that there is pay equity. And then after you've done that, making sure that employees are educated on where they fall into that range and why.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Sydney Artt, Director of People at Anaconda, for joining the show. You can learn more about Sydney and Anaconda by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkillstrom.com. That's GregKilstrom.com. While you're there, check out my series of best-selling Agile Brand guides covering a wide variety of marketing technology topics, or you can search for Greg Killstrom on Amazon. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.
The Agile Brand.